Luckily, I have Jack Cancila here in the studio with me. We're going to be interviewing him as a World War II veteran and talk about his life before World War II and during World War II. Jack, could you say hello to everybody for us?
Hello, everyone.
Very good. Good start. Tell us about what year were you born in, Jack?
I was born in January, the 27th day of the month, in 1921.
1921. I'm trying to think who was president in 1921.
I don't have a clue.
Would it have been Coolidge, maybe?
It could have been.
Yeah, I would think it may have been. And how many people, what town were you born in?
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, but in a section of the city called Carey Patch.
Carey Patch.
Made up of every nationality known.
What was it like growing up there?
It was like a dream.
What was the preponderance of the nationalities? Were they Italian, Polish?
There were Irish initially, primarily Irish. Then Italians, Polish, German, and that's about it.
What kind of games did you guys play? What kind of sports were you into?
Well, when I got old enough to play, we used to play almost everything, softball especially. But I was never good at that. I tried to be good, but I wasn't. My family moved there out of desperation. Almost every immigrant family that came into that area faced the same reality of life. It was tough. We got along because they were all in the same boat. They all had everything to gain, nothing to lose, by trying new techniques on how to exist.
What was the primary employer at the time? What did most of the people do?
Oh, they worked at odd jobs, most of us labor. My mother, fortunately, was only 8 years old when she went to work in a garment factory, delivering fabric samples to the various sewing machines. And she kept watching these women sew. And she was practiced on her lunch hour on one of the machines. And inside of 2 years, they gave her own machine, and she was only 11 years old.
How much school did she end up with?
None.
No schooling at all.
Yet she taught herself. She read a lot. And I remember asking her, "Didn't you miss going to school?" She said, "No, we were too busy. We had to make money to exist." My dad worked for the Frisco Railroad, and he was completely happy with that job. He worked as a gandy dancer. You know what that is?
No.
They give you a 6-foot tall crowbar weighing 50 pounds. In order to get the job, an individual had to hold this crowbar at arm's length for 30 seconds. And it weighed 50 pounds.
Wow.
And he made it. And all they did was straighten out tracks from Union Station to Grand Avenue and back in one day.
So did the tracks move around a lot during the day?
Oh, sure. There was a lot of freight trains moving through that area, and the train tracks would come out of sequence with each other, so they had to straighten them.
How did they come up with the name Gandy Dancer?
I have no idea.
There's got to be a story there.
There is a story there. It goes back for years.
Was baseball big when you were growing up in the 20s and 30s?
I wasn't aware of baseball when I lived in the Patch. They call it the Patch because people got tired of saying Carey. And so we called it the Patch. But the neighborhoods were so unique in that there were no curbs, just muddy streets.
No pavement.
No pavement.
Asphalt, nothing.
The sidewalks were made of wood, and they went for miles with those sidewalks all the way down to the riverfront.
I'll be darned. What was the street that you grew up on? Do you remember the address?
My street's name was Lotus Street. It was 2 blocks from Hogan Street. Now, in Carey Patch, there existed gangs of Irish hoodlums who preyed upon the poor people for anything. They played the numbers. They forced them to play the numbers game. They forced them to gamble. They did everything they could to entice the immigrant out of his money.
How did the Italians fit into the big?
They didn't at that time.
So
they were not that far south. They moved south to the Hill, which is a well-known,
today
respected area now. The fact that my dad was a laborer enabled him to get more jobs on the side. He had jobs where he'd do work for rich people that lived in the surrounding areas. The Irish were the first ones there. They established themselves as rulers. What they said went. You had to follow their orders. Most of the policemen were Irish. Most of the firemen were Irish. So they had all the pull with City Hall.
And what religion was predominant? Catholic?
Catholic. Predominantly Catholic. I'd say there were one church only, St. Patrick's, and it was finally built, and then what followed was several dozen more Catholic churches in and around the area. St. Leo's, St. Barnabas, I could name quite a few. I can't remember them all, but they were all in the same fix. They needed parishioners. And the Italian church was the richest of all because they had the most money.
Because of Rome, or?
No. They were just merchants. They were born merchants. They still exist today. Produce on the riverfront.
Right.
They used to sell produce. The farmers would bring the produce into them, and they would sell it for their price. But that went on for years and years, and still goes on today.
Now, did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had 3 other brothers. One was a cabinet maker. One was a administrator for an aircraft company. And my youngest brother had his own department with Boeing aircraft. So he was, even after he retired, they called him back for consulting work. And he was making $50 an hour.
Not bad.
Not bad at all. So he quit, and they called him back. In fact, I went to his retirement party the first time.
Did the four of you, all 4 of you, go into World War II, or?
No, just my brother Joe and I. My brother Joe and I had a problem with his bladder, and we slept in a 3-quarter bed. There wasn't enough room for a full-size bed. This was a house called Vinegar House. It was named after old Irish and British battle in Ireland. Vinegar houses. And all they were tenement buildings. But every landowner was Irish.
I'll be darned.
They owned all the apartments.
So 2 of you slept in one bed, or 4 of you slept in one bed?
2 of us slept in one bed. And whenever my brother had a problem with his bladder, he peed on my back. That occurred about maybe 3 times a week. I'd have to get up in the middle of the night, wake my mother up and say, "Mom, Joe did it again." She'd get up, never complained. She took the sheets off. We had rubber sheets below. Put the clean sheets on. I washed myself off, and Joe washed himself off, went back to bed.
And he was able to be conscripted to the Army?
He'd gotten over that.
By the time he got older?
Period, yeah. He went into the Air Force.
Now, did you go to school?
I went to high school and college.
And college. And what year did you join the Army?
November the 6th, 1939. I joined it on desperation. I could not find a job doing anything.
Had you graduated college by then?
No, I hadn't gone into the Army yet.
Okay. So you, right out of high school, you went into the Army.
Exactly.
And when you went into the Army, what was your military occupational specialty, or MOS is what they call it?
Well, initially I was in the cavalry for basic training. I never saw so many horses' asses in my life, including the officers. Now I walk out of the stable like this, and this corporal stopped me. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I got to wash this stuff." I said, "Get back there and finish the horse. You're not finished yet." I had to go back in there and finish washing the horse down. And then he allowed me to go to the latrine to take a shower. I never got rid of that smell in my clothes, ever. They were laundered. Every time I got hot, I smelled like a horse.
So do you have a special spot in your heart for horses to this day?
Yes, I do. I never shoveled so many horse apples in my life. And this corporal was just chicken enough to say, "I want the big ones over there and the small ones over there," with a pitchfork.
Where were you inducted into the Army at, and then where did you progress along?
Fort Riley, Kansas.
And did they bus you over there? Put you on a bus and take you over?
No, train.
Train?
From Jefferson Barracks there. I woke up to the smell of horse poop, and I looked out the window, and there were horses everywhere. And that was initially the end of the cavalry, because they were bringing in tanks at that time, small tanks, experimental tanks. I never got into one of those. But I did take my basic training there. We did say, can I use any kind of cuss words at all?
I want you to speak freely. I want you to talk.
Well, this Corporal Weiss was a typical regular Army jerk. Didn't know anything other than the Army. And every other word was a four-letter word, when he addressed us especially. And we just were not comfortable with that. So we all made a point to say, well, when we leave, we'll leave them a message, okay? Everybody agreed. And at the end of 6 weeks, we were taken by train to California. As we were leaving the post in a 2.5-ton truck, in unison, we all lashed out at him and said, "So long, asshole." And he was shaking his fist at us. We didn't care. What are you going to do to us? And we took off for California. That was the last time I ever saw him.
How old was he? About?
I'd say maybe in his late 20s.
So he's pretty young.
Yeah. But he was just plain horseshit.
And then once you got to California, what happened?
We had beautiful, beautiful barracks. You know, so unlike Jefferson Barracks in that they were new and they were kept up in mint condition all the time.